You
Okay.
go.
Yeah, I wrote two pieces about that. Not everybody knows it. It's been overcome by a new Trump administration embarrassment scandal, but one of more substance, I would definitely argue. Last week, the Department of Defense took down a website page that detailed Jackie Robinson's military service. There was reporting saying that this happened due to their purge of DEI materials, generally from the DoD, under Pete Hegseth. And it was put back up a few hours later because after it was reported, that's a bit of an embarrassment, and it might have died down, but their PR official basically said something to the effect that they don't view some of the people that they took down through the prism of race. Jackie Robinson wasn't the only one, but he was mentioned in this specific context, or through census category, which is a nice general sentiment about people, but is completely idiotic in that particular context. Because obviously, if you're talking about Jackie Robinson, you're talking about race if you're discussing his legacy. So it was very stupid. But then it turns into this soapbox excuse from all these sports personalities, millennial sports personalities in particular, who jump on the soapbox. They're narrowly correct about this, but you're just reminded that they never do this in the other direction, that the finger only points in one direction. I mentioned Mina Kimes as one of these people. I said that she gave a monologue about it. Everything she said in the monologue that was critical of the taking down of this was correct, by the way, every word of it. But there was backlash to her and to it. And I made the point that I think part of that backlash is indeed informed by the one direction nature of a lot of sports media and ESPN, where most of the fans vote the other way, but they get lectured all the time. And the people who lecture them, with few exceptions, they never lecture their own side. And we're going on like 10 years of this. And these are the points I made. I got a lot of pushback from a lot of my readers and subscribers. I might even try to dredge up an email, Ryan, but the floor is yours. The floor is yours. Talk about it.
Yeah. So here, I mean, I guess the reactions to it are a few ways. Like, so Mina Kimes, I think, is underrated in how good she is at talking at football by the people who don't like her. Now, ESPN has given her a lot of opportunities, so she's not underrated by them. But she is the only person who didn't play a sport who is like labeled as a sport analyst at ESPN. I don't know if like most people think about this stuff, but there's like a distinction between reporter and analyst. Like Adam Schefter, Field Yates, those people are reporters. And they might, like, you know, opinion might seep into what they say on the air, because how could it not? I mean, you're talking that many hours, but like their job is to report the what. And then Mina is there as like an analyst and breaking down film. And it just, ESPN doesn't put people who didn't play football in that role, like historically. And so I think that in some ways, she's probably like benefited from her identity in getting to that perch. But then I think people who resent her benefiting from her identity are less inclined to like think like, oh, she's actually really good at this. She loves the sport. She speaks clearly and concisely. The former players that she works with, like Dan Orlovsky and Marcus Spears, like working with her and really seem to respect her opinions on the game that they played professionally. And I think that people miss that part of it. But I think to your other point, where it's really not just her, but she was the recipient of all of this backlash this time, is that ESPN has not replaced a Will Cain type. He's been outnumbered in the last decade by like 40-1 of people who are strong Democrat Party cheerleaders. And it's like a very tough thing to get into, because you start doing this and people are like, well, Trump is heinous and he's different. And this is a different situation than just Democrat and Republican. But they were doing this. They've done this to every Republican presidential candidate of our lifetime. So it's it's tough to say that it's like just a Trump thing, but the ESPN viewer, the median viewer, I think it's logical that that person is a Trump voter. I
Yeah.
would say if of like any given moment of someone watching ESPN, I think that person would index to be more likely a Trump voter than the general population. And Trump did just win the election, and he won it in 2016 as well. And so those people don't like to watch TV and get lectured about politics in a one-way direction. And, we did just come off a presidency where Biden seemed like he was like a vegetable for the last 2 years. The Democratic cities, we live in two of the bigger ones. They have not been well run over the last decade, and that's putting it kindly. And so you look at like those two factors, and Mina Kimes, she campaigned with Karen Bass, who had the disastrous reaction to the LA fires. And so I understand why people like get upset in general about the political leanings of ESPN.
Yeah. And some people say they don't want any politics in sports, and they don't mean that. They just would like it if the politics reflected their own views. Other people might want more balance. I think I'm of the more balance, please. I think, by the way, this might not even be an individual sin. Should people start trying to balance all their cultural commentary when that's not the way they feel? It sounds a little strange to me to demand that of Mina. Okay, Mina, we need you to talk about some of the bad things that the Democrats are doing and the Republicans are doing, and balance it all. Meanwhile, you're supposed to be covering NFL. Maybe part of the issue, as I think I'm trying to argue, is that there's not really much of a presence on the other side there. So there's not somebody who will provide the other. There's not the Will Cain. And some of that, as I wrote about, is that liberals, frankly, are far more morally disgusted by conservatives than the other way around. There's a lot of social science to demonstrate that. So it is difficult within an atmosphere that tilts blue to have even a countenance
They're kind of doing it on CNN with Scott Jennings, where it's like he's getting he's in these like 4-on-1 arguments, but at least they're like giving him his space.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's weird though. They're giving him the last word. So like the viewers, like we haven't really seen a dynamic like what he's doing.
Well, and it's been a hit. I mean, that's more interesting. And I think the point I'm making, no offense to Mina Kimes, great analyst, it's that if I've been on this journey with you or other commentators in your position for the last 10 years, and you literally never, ever, ever criticize the Democratic Party while it is currently at the lowest point that it has been in my lifetime. It is coming off a massive scandal, a scandal many of my friends and peers have just rationalized to themselves and just said, oh, well, they didn't want to admit about Biden. Like, no, the president had dementia, obviously, for years. The media covered it up. There are bad things happening right now with the Trump administration. There are scandals aforementioned, for instance, inviting the editor of the Atlantic Monthly onto your group chat as you're planning a war maneuver. These things are both happening, both bear mentioning. But if you only mention the one and it's only, hey, let's pause this episode of Sports Time for a very special episode and excerpt for me to lecture you. If it's only in one direction, it just feels like propaganda, and people resent it. They will take the give and take if they feel like you're off script to a degree. Charles Barkley votes Democrat, has campaigned for the Democrats. I don't think conservatives hate him as much. Part of it's his natural charm, but part of it's the sense that he's liable to say anything. I think that there is a resentment of feeling like you're trying to message something to me. PR, it's not authentic. It's not coming just from you. And I know it's not coming just from you because you're probably hiding the parts of yourself that doubt and have trouble with stuff that your side is doing.
Yeah. I mean, we've had this we've had this archetype of a conversation probably a half dozen times.
Yeah.
It does keep coming up. And
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's Around the Horn is like specifically like the people who are on that show and have been elevated on that show. It seems like that has been the like ground zero for this type of discussion. And
Yeah.
so that
well, do you think it's fair? Do you think it's fair that I brought up? Never know how to pronounce Klingon. I mean, he's kind of impressive as a rookie, by the way, out of UConn, the center.
UConn, UConn.
Yeah. I enjoyed. I've enjoyed his work in the NBA so far. He had that clip. I pronounce it like Star Trek Maze says. Klingon. There we go. I enjoy him as a Blazer. But because they went to the White House after winning the championship and talked about Biden in this dementia-addled state, asking for the picture twice because he didn't remember doing it the first time. Barstool ate that up, and it might have even been on a Barstool platform for all I remember. But that's the sort of thing, as an example, I bring up of they're just not going to, that's not going to get brought up on ESPN. That's sports politics crossover. And you just feel like if something happens the other way, where it's sports politics crossover and embarrasses the other side, what happens, and it's fodder. Or am I getting too creative with the example?
I do want to be fair. They have like showed Trump several times, getting cheered, like they at UFC events, college football. So that part, I do want to be a little bit fair to ESPN.
Yeah.
Commentators.
I feel like ESPN on November 5th, 2024, the editorial standards in regards to politics shifted a bit at ESPN.